Coogs House, I'm sure you can imagine, but the rewatch didn't get a lot better, and we kind of sort of have basketball to talk about.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater that came to stop by or a glutton for punishment, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen today. Appreciate you making us your first listen each and every day. If you join the conversation, if you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below about a time you got spanked, chewed out, whatever, because there's a lot of that happening on Saturday with Houston Cougars falling to Kansas. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time, the best place to get tickets guaranteed, but more on that later. Today we're going to talk some about, we are going to mention, I guess you should say, the thing that shall not be named, the super secret hoop scrimmage. That'll take up a segment of the show because it is a secret hoop scrimmage without a whole lot of details. I want to talk some about a new segment I want to kind of get rolling here in the second half of football season going into basketball season. I'll talk more about that in a second, about rewarding and condemning things that are good and bad. But first and foremost, I want to talk some about the rewatch, because on the rewatch, typically, and I will say, as a coach, right, Houston-born teacher and coach, it's never as good as you think it is when you win. The rewatch always shows more holes than you remember, and it's never as bad as you thought it was when you lose. There's always more things to build off of than you thought, right? And I think the biggest thing to take away in watching the rewatch on the offensive side of the ball was this quarterback dynamic going back and forth. We now know, we didn't know in the immediate aftermath of the game because it wasn't obvious, but that Zbiotics Chris was hurt. We mentioned in the post game that he heard that something, went to the blue tent, came back in and played a series, and then was never seen on the field again. He was on the sideline with his helmet on or whatever, but did not make his way back to the field after that. Sounds like there was a hamstring issue. Didn't say any, there's never been an announced degree or how anything like that. But it does at least make me feel a little more comfortable that it was an injury-based thing as opposed to a play-based thing. So it would be kind of counterproductive to me to have declared that he was your starter so definitively and then pull him that early based on just play. Although, to be clear, Zbiotics Chris was not playing very well before he went out. I will say also that I wonder if it was the kind of a hamstring thing where he goes out there to see if he can just play with it and not run as much. And then they realize that they are kind of limited with Zbiotics Chris if he's not running a whole lot. A lot of what he does is predicated on catching the defense, with his second threat being those legs. Whatever the case may be, Zbiotics Chris now looked good. Donovan Smith came in. Donovan Smith, the rewatch, looks better than I thought he did live, but still not great, if that makes any sense. So his first two drives, he comes in right away, and Kansas is not really prepared. It doesn't look like to me. Houston gets a couple touchdowns, including one big-time run after catch by Mekhi Mews. But the truth is the ball there was a short completion and a little bit of a short crosser concept. Mews makes a whole lot of guys miss and takes off after that, right? Now, that's not to say that Donovan didn't hit him on it, but, take what the defense gives you, and then he ends up making a play out of it. What I do think Donovan is historically loose with the football. His problem at Texas Tech was throwing interceptions. His problem last year, his problem before being replaced as a starter this year, has been throwing interceptions, right? And he threw 3 of them on Saturday. And I think it felt like more of the same old, right? As he threw those. And in hindsight, it feels like they were as much receiver problems as his. He has caught a lot of flack for throwing the reverse flea flicker down the field to Malik Carr that got intercepted. And while I don't think it was a very well thrown ball, I feel confirmed in the rewatch in saying that Malik Carr does not make a very good play on the football either. Would I prefer the ball go further high and outside to where if Malik Carr doesn't catch it, goes out of bounds? Yes. Would rather a jump ball be thrown because Malik Carr is like 6'12" or whatever he is, and he's a giant, right? Sure. But on the whole, while it's not a well thrown ball, it's not one that he couldn't have gotten. And certainly not one he couldn't have made a play on that maybe makes it not an interception, live to play another day, right? I don't mean to question effort because I don't think that's fair. I think there's a lot of ways that like football can look weird in that way because you're trying to like read things while the entire play happens in 4.5 seconds, and that's just not very long, right? So a half-second pause can look like a problem, but it did look like Malik Carr let up and running. I don't know if he thought that they were all too overthrown, if he thought he was going to have to tackle a guy and didn't realize how close the ball was going to be to him, or if he just didn't think the ball was going to make it and started to pull up. I don't know what the case may be, but the ball there was pretty bad. On the defensive side, it's hard to pinpoint specific spots here. I mentioned the post game that I felt like linebacker play was bad, and second watch agreed with that somewhat. Kendra Gant played maybe 15 plays or something like that. This game did not have a lot of plays on either side of the football. I think Kansas ran about 60 offensive plays. Houston ran about 65. And that's not a lot of football plays. But honestly, if I look at the linebacker spots, Jamal Morris, not his best game by any stretch. He's kind of been a guy that's kind of been reliably in the right place at the right time. This year he missed a lot of this week he missed a lot of tackles. Not a great look. Michael Batten, when he was not engaged in a block, played pretty well. He had a really hard time getting off of blocks in this one. And I coached with a guy. I was an offensive coach when I coached, but I coached the guy that would always tell his guys that the sin was not in getting blocked. The sin was in staying blocked. And I don't mean to maybe cast that much of a judgment. But it does feel like there's a lot of times that Batten was staying blocked. And when he could get off of a block, he'd make a play. I still think he's one of our best defensive players. He just had a hard time getting off of blocks on Saturday. Other things worth noting on this defensive effort, the back half of the coverage was weaker than it's been in the run game, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is like safeties coming up to fill maybe didn't feel as hard, fast, impactfully, etc. I do think they try to take AJ Halsey somewhat out of the run game. If you're looking at what Kansas is doing on a second watch, when you kind of know what's coming, you can say, well, where is AJ? Okay, he's here. They run there, that kind of stuff. But that also put Kentrell Webb in a tough spot. And honestly, in the run game, I felt like he does get juked out of his shoes at one point in the hole. But even outside of that, I think that Webb has played a lot better this year. The defense is kind of predicated on that secondary being really, really strong. The games Houston's played well, the defense has looked really, really strong. And so in being critical of Kentrell or whomever, it's mostly because, like, honestly, we kind of need them to be like ballers to have a chance. And it's not really fair to the defense. We talked about that ad nauseum before, that the offense is not great. I mean, 14 points this week was the third highest output you've had on offense this season, right? But to have a chance, you're going to have excellent defensive play. So when you have subpar defensive play, it looks really bad. And that's what happened. I will say on rewatch, when you see a team run for as many yards as Kansas did on Saturday, you kind of worry about how good your defensive line played. I thought the defensive line actually played okay on the second watch. Keith Cooper's getting doubled a lot, still making some plays. Carlos Allen is eating blocks, and that's what you want your nose tackle to do. AJ Holmes didn't have his best game, but I wouldn't have thought it was a bad game, maybe because we have a high standard for him. Zy Strong had pretty good game of rotation. Brandon Mack got put into coverage a few times, so it's hard to call him a lineman always, but across the board, not their worst effort, which I guess was encouraging, but it was a pretty rough watch for the Cougs. And so I want to talk about a new segment in a second that I want to kind of introduce to talk about after games, because I think it's clever and it's a good way to talk about what happened on an individual, I'm going through an individual standpoint. But before we get to that, we got a new buddy to talk to you about, and it's something I wish I knew about earlier in life. That is Zbiotics pre-alcoholic probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was engineered by PhD scientists to tackle those rough mornings after drinking, or even after, the Cougs can't pull one off against Kansas, who was 1-5. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol actually is converted into toxic byproducts in your guts, and it's that byproduct, not dehydration, that you should be blaming for your rough day. This pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to help break down this production, and just remember that make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best the next day. You can step 1 is you drink the pre-alcohol. Step 2, drink responsibly. Step 3, enjoy the very next day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On College at checkout. Zbiotics backed up with a 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout for 15% off. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Cougs here, talking about Houston dropping the ball to Kansas in a big kind of way. And we did the post game, and we did a rewatch on Sunday. After watching the Texans fall apart, it didn't help to then go back and rewatch this one after the fact. But I will say that I was trying to grapple with this, and I was texting back and forth to Derek. Derek does Locked On Jayhawks. We talked to him last week, and we made some jokes about Kobe Young. And he said, Kobe Young was the most obvious GOAT for the game. And I ha, whatever. And he was like, but so-and-so was his other GOAT, and then spelled it with lowercase letters as opposed to like capital, all, the acronym being greatest of all time or whatever, right? He went lowercase the second one. And I was like, what? That guy played bad. And he does a segment afterwards called Goats and Goats, meaning like greatest of all time, great performances, and like scapegoats, goats. And I thought that was really clever. And I frankly immediately went to this game for Houston because there's a very clear and obvious, like capital letters, GOAT in Mekhi Mews. Now, obviously, when you score 50% of the points, you're having a pretty good day on offense. But Mekhi Mews had 6 catches for 99 yards and a touchdown. The big 52-yard catch I would stress, as I mentioned in talking about Donovan, that was all Mekhi. Mekhi catches the ball about 8 yards downfield-ish and zip takes it off, right? And I feel like that's showing off what he does, but it's also important to remember, like, Mekhi Mews is not a starter. He's filling in last weekend for Stephon Boogie Johnson, who was at home with, recovering from a concussion still, and worth monitoring that. I'd argue he's one of our better football players, at least in a talent perspective. Maybe I hadn't had the production this year, but keep an eye on what that turns into or what that looks like. But 6 catches was twice as many as the next highest Coug. 99 yards was almost 3 times as many as the next highest Coug. And again, he had half of the points. Really, really hard to think of anyone that played better on offense or any side of the ball than Mekhi did in this game. And you can almost argue that, save maybe the Rice game, Mekhi's impact on offense on Saturday was as high as anyone's been all season for Houston, really. And he could look like Zion against TCU, but he made mistakes there too. And Donovan Smith had to have the drive at the end of the game in that one, right? So across the board here, I think it's worth pointing that Mekhi Mews had the GOAT game for Houston, the lowercase g GOAT, if we're trying to figure out how this works. I'm going to give to the combination of right tackle, Jake Wiley and Re'Shaun Sanford. Now, they've both had better plays than this, but there's a play, and I believe it's the late third quarter, if I'm reading my notes right, where Houston has just gotten the ball, and they need to kind of like make something happen. Game's getting away, and Wiley and Sanford run into each other and thus cause a sack. Actually, if I remember this right, they actually might have been the end of the second quarter, not the start of the third quarter. But it's a reachable game. The game is not out of reach by any stretch. And, if you're into offensive line technicalities, Jake Wiley opens the door, meaning he twists his hips and gets perpendicular line of scrimmage instead of truly setting, which is pretty poor technique. Like, you're trying to coach that out of high school kids. The running back, Re'Shaun Sanford, kind of pops his feet, but doesn't ever attack the line, either to go block someone or anything. And the two of them like hit and make a T because, again, Wiley is now perpendicular to line of scrimmage. Sanford is that thinks I'm giving it a thumbs up. That's weird. Sanford is, parallel to line of scrimmage, trying to figure out what he's going to do. And as they clip each other, the defensive end gets a very easy sack. Now, I do think some of the sacks were Donovan's fault. There were two that jumped off the page to me that were not, and this is one of them. When Donovan is counting things pre-snap, that defensive end has two guys accounted for him. He shouldn't have to worry about that guy for at least 2.5 seconds. As the play is unfolding, he's got two guys on that side of him, and they didn't send anyone in a blitz to that side. He should feel comfortable looking downfield and knowing that the right side should be taken care of. It's not until he's hitting the ground that he has any idea that that's not what happened there. And that's not on the quarterback in that sense, right? We're going to go back to the positives. Good GOAT, capital G GOAT, all caps GOAT. DJ Butler, and looking through analytics on Pro Football Focus, he actually had the best outing of anyone on the Houston Cougars. He did not play a lot of snaps at running back. He played just 14 per PFF. It feels about right. I think he had 2 total series. He only had 3 carries. Pretty strong carries, though, across the board. He also had a catch. The catch turned into be 27 yards. And I couldn't see any problems with when he was asked to block. And so, it's not often a guy plays, a fifth of the snaps and ends up having a large chunk of your production. But Butler had the most rushing yards and the third most receiving yards on the team as a freshman back. Didn't get a whole lot of playing time before this game and made a big impact at the end of it. And it wasn't the kind of garbage time where there were not starters in. Both teams had their starters in at least a large number for a lot of the game, whether it's from because guys cramping or whatever. Homecoming, veterans want to play it at home for Kansas for homecoming or what have you, right? DJ Butler played very, very well. The running back rotation continues to be weird. Parker Jenkins barely playing at all. Can't figure out why they're playing Re'Shaun Sanford or Stacey Sneed when they're playing the two of them. There are times I feel like Jamarian Burnett needs to be in the game, and he's not. And there are times that he is, and I'm like, why is he in the game? He's our bruiser or short yardage guy. But I digress. Last thing on the sacks and the lowercase g GOATs. I mentioned the right side. But there was a couple moments where it looked like we were supposed to be keeping tight ends in max protection because they never went downfield, and they also did not block anybody. I think we have 2 really talented tight ends on the roster, and so that's why I sit here with this. But I'm going to give a lowercase GOATs to the tight end room. And, I guess Malik Carr had one nice catch that didn't count because he stepped out of bounds after he caught the one-handed one on the sideline. but they both missed blocks. They had drops. They were unreliable in the run game. They're too good to have that kind of a game, right? If they were just not good tight ends, I'd be like, we need to scrap the tight end thing and get out of 11 personnel, get out of 12, whatever. That's not the case. We have good tight ends. They just didn't play well. And there's a lot of admission going on about causes of that. But at the end of the day, if they're going to win a football game, those guys just have to do their job better. Like that, there's also some onus there too, right? And so they get the lowercase goats as well. Interesting that Houston gave up 42 points, and there were not a whole lot of defensive ones to give, I guess this or that or the other thing, but just an ugly watch across the board. I think we're going to flush it and move on. Rumor on the street is that Utah just fired their offensive coordinator. So I got to do some diving into that a little bit, see who's going to replace him, what that means Utah could look like this week. Because as bad as Utah has looked thus far, and they continue to look worse as the season goes on, Kansas was 1-5. So what am I going to be able to tell about that? We'll see who fills in his place. I'll text JT Locked on Utes over there and see what he thinks. But we also had some basketball over the weekend to talk about in a good way, kind of sort of a game. It'll make more sense in a second. Before we get anywhere, I want to make sure that we talk to you about our buddies at Game Time, who bring you the show today. Now, Game Time is the lowest price on tickets, guaranteed, all-in pricing, all kinds of cool features, and they have to figure out what you're looking at. All-in pricing for the lower bowl. If I go to Game Time right now on my phone, Game Time, and go check out the Utah at Houston game this Saturday. It's going to be at 6 o'clock local time. Game Time, the app, says you can get into the lower bowl for $28 a seat, all-in pricing. Can't do anything better than that, guys. I mean, that's as good as it gets. All kinds of cool apps, but I love the lowest price guarantee. You find a ticket in the same section of road for cheaper somewhere else. They can credit you back 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Park Ranger Locked on Coogs. Speaking of it being game time, Houston kind of sort of played a game over the weekend. It was not so secret. Houston was taking pictures for social media on their way to the bus to go to Shreveport. But Houston met up with Ole Miss in Shreveport to play a secret scrimmage and then leaked pictures of it via their own social media account. It was very clearly guys in Ole Miss practice gear and guys in Houston practice gear playing basketball. Some impressive pictures. JoJo Tugler is blocking a shot and his fingertips are at the top of the box on the backboard. Impressive, guys look good. Cordell Jefferson's just jacked up these days. It looks like Milos can run with a starting group, so it looks like your 4 starters plus Milos. An impressive look as far as photographs go. And for what it's worth, I think there are a lot of questions around why this is a secret scrimmage, and it comes down to the NCAA. And I mostly want to stress that because the NCAA made this a secret scrimmage, not Kellen, the U of H, anybody. It was an NCAA rule because the NCAA has a lot of rules around what you can do in the preseason. So per NCAA guidelines, you can have 2 preseason moments against someone else, right? You can have 2 exhibitions. You can have 2 scrimmages. You can have 1 of each, as Houston is doing. You can do any combination, any order, but you can only have 2 before the season starts. And I actually heard Seth Greenberg talk on this on ESPN. It's been years ago now. And there's some interesting points. I went back and found it to make sure I was refreshed on it. But he actually advocated for the scrimmages. And that's why I thought it was important to bring that into this. And his big deal was you want the rehearsal of all of your game time warm-ups and your game time routines and all that kind of stuff without the stress of cameras and things like that. He thought it was also important in his day not to be exchanging film and stuff like that because there's no film of a scrimmage to send somebody. Right? It's not the same thing as an exhibition game. They can't just go to ESPN Plus and download it. And he also said that if your team was more veteran and you weren't maybe worried about the butterflies, the goosebumps, the getting through the routine for the first time, what you actually end up doing those scrimmages is not playing 40 minutes of basketball, but saying, all right, 3 minutes left, you're in the bonus, you're up 3, we got to figure it out, and vice versa, or whatever the scenario is, and doing different scenarios, right, and things like that. And I don't speak too high. That's exactly one of the things that Houston was doing in the scrimmage, right, is finding those scenarios. Hey, we're going to count rebounds as a point, offensive rebounds are 2, baskets don't count. Those kinds of things for periods of time against teams as opposed to just playing traditional basketball. Okay. The other thing about a scrimmage, though, I thought Seth Greenberg mentioned that I think is really important for this scrimmage is that in a scrimmage, you're theoretically coaching alongside the other staff. That is to say that you're working together in a scrimmage as opposed to being on opposite ends of the sidelines. And that means that you're giving honest feedback in the moment about what's happening. You can change the scenario, change the plan, change the whatever in the moment. And an exhibition, you're playing 40 minutes. You can't do that necessarily. And frankly, if you wanted to talk to their coach, you'd maybe call the guy after or the next day, if at all. That wouldn't happen, right? The NCAA's big thing is that if you pick a scrimmage and you do all those things that were just so wonderful we just talked about, as Houston decided to go with this scrimmage with Ole Miss, is it has to be unticketed, untelevised, etc. Hence the super secret aspect of it, right? It's essentially just a practice, and it's not even necessarily the same media availability that they have at practices. I'm not local, so I don't get to go to everything, but they do actually let people in at the start and end of practice a lot at Houston. They're not secretive about that. But if you're going to do anything on TV or publicize it, discuss it, share details of it, any of those kinds of marketing things, the NCAA requires you to treat it like a true exhibition game. And then you have to just play an exhibition, 40 minutes of an exhibition game, right? And that changes what you get out of it. And so Houston opts to do this scrimmage with Ole Miss. They've done secret scrimmages in the past with Texas and Texas Tech. And if you notice a theme here, that's because Sampson consistently does this with Coach Chris Beard. Now, say what you want about Chris Beard, but I would argue that he's very similar on the floor to Sampson. Hard-nosed, old school, tough, can get kind of loud, wears his emotions on his sleeve, and also defense first, right? And for what it's worth, that to me is a chance for you're seeing if they're working together in the scrimmage the way you would not in an exhibition game, giving that honest feedback back and forth. Clearly, Sampson values what Beard and his staff put together as feedback, right? They did it when he was at Tech. They did it when he was at Texas. They're doing it. He's at Ole Miss. That's consistent, right? For what it's worth, I bounce around what can tell me to people. Actually got more out of Ole Miss people for what it's worth. But if you're a Houston person who wants to talk to me, DM me. They're always open. The resounding argument was just hey, this Houston team's really good. And that was the Ole Miss people saying, hey, this Houston team is really good. And they feel really strongly about what they've got. They're a top 25 team presently. Again, Beard's a really good coach. He brought some transfers. They got this thing rolling. I just think that there's a lot of what's going on. And we're going to know a lot more on Sunday when Houston plays an exhibition game, which you'll be able to watch against Texas A&M. Interestingly, Houston was A&M's last game. Houston eliminated them from the NCAA tournament last year. And A&M, because of a Jamal Shead injury, was actually Houston's second to last game last year. A&M returns a lot. Houston returns 4 out of 5 starters. These teams know each other really well, I would argue, for teams going into a scrimmage like this. And so I think it should feel like a fairly advanced exhibition game between Houston and A&M. I'm sure the scouting reports probably not that changed from what it was like last spring. And so I say all that to say that honestly, as far as this preseason basketball goes, and there's not a Las Vegas Summer League, there's not, a series of 10 preseason games. This is it. You get practice and you get that scrimmage and you get that exhibition game. This is it. I think we'll learn a lot about this basketball team in week. I guess as I'm recording this on Sunday, a week from today. I guess as you're listening to this on Sunday, and I'm looking forward to it. Not just because the football team's having some struggles in the rebuild, but because the basketball team is fun. It's great kids. It's great culture. It's great coaches, and that all adds up to a pretty great team to cover. So I'm looking forward to it. We got a lot of things in football to talk about this week as well. Book Club episode kind of 1, kind of 2. Look in the first 3 chapters of Dream with Miriam Fader. Check that out later today on Monday. Read along, follow along. We're talking about the book. It'll be stored on YouTube as well in its own playlist if you want to go through and find it. Locked On Cougs at Prime Member, the Locked On Podcast. Now there's your team every day. Go Cougs.